All right, welcome in. This is called the Front Row Podcast with Coach Mark Gottfried, and today I'm really fired up because not only do I have probably one of the greatest coaches in the history of the NFL, how about that, John? But also I have a relative, and but I've got John Harbaugh, head coach of the Baltimore Ravens. And John, thank you for joining, and thank you for joining us. And how you doing?
Doing great, Mark. It's great to be with you. You know, it's high praise, but as you well know, in the family that we come from, you can't be the best in the family, man. You could be the best in some other place, but being the best in the family, and you go back to your dad and your uncle and my dad and the whole Crestline crew and Uncle Jerry and everybody else. There's a lot of great coaches in this group.
It's a lot. Matter of fact, I had told my dad, Joe Gottfried, and to give everybody just a little bit of context to this, a small little railroad town in north central Ohio, Crestline, Ohio, is where both John and his brother Jim and his sister Joni, their parents were raised, and then my parents were raised. And then the interesting thing is that John and I share our grandmothers were sisters. So, you know, we go way back. But so the small town in Ohio, how about this one, John? My dad sends me something the other day, and it's a picture of my birth certificate. Or actually, it was when I got baptized is what it was, when I got baptized. And the witnesses on the line of the baptism are Jack and Jackie Harbaugh. How about that one?
Wow,
1964.
I love that. I'm not surprised. I mean, I remember going back and we were kids and it would be a Thanksgiving or an Easter or Christmas even. And our two grandmas' apartments, right, were right next to each other in that little apartment building on John Street in Crestline, Ohio. And man, we'd go in there and the family would all be in there. Everybody'd be packing these two little apartments and we'd go down to the basement and Santa would come running down. And I don't know, it's either one of your uncles or one of my uncles that was Santa. I never quite figured it out. Or we had that garage in the back there that was kind of a detached garage that they had the basketball hoops up on either end of the garage, you remember? and we'd go in there and play shirts and skins, and we were little kids running around there with our dads and uncles. Pretty awesome.
It's a great way to grow up, and I'm so proud of you, John. You've had an amazing run, and but before we kind of talk about the NFL career, and here's a question I want to ask you, because I know how this is for me, but the fact that both of our parents, well, all four of our parents, your mother and father, my mother and father, they're from this small little hardworking kind of blue collar town. And I kind of look at, the success I was able to have and you've had and Jim and all of us. But there has to be, in my view, a correlation of like how we were raised coming out of our parents coming out of that town. Do you think, and I think it has, but tell me your thoughts on how maybe that shaped you as a coach, person, because it was I think it's very impactful.
Mark, I couldn't agree with you more, man. I mean, you think back to it, Crestline, Ohio was the center of our universe. Like, it wasn't the town you or I grew up in, or Jim, or we weren't living there, but our family was all there. And we go back there and we hear the stories, and they were playing at the park, and Coach Merle and all the different, Gates Brown and all the different legends that came out of that town. The pride that everybody had being from that little town. Now you go out, you tell somebody Crestline, Ohio, and they look at you with blank stare, like what, where, huh? To us, it was a focal point. It's like, to me, that's like any small town kind of in this country. I think that's how people feel about their town, when they're from that town, and some stay, some go, some come back. But everybody remembers what it was like to know everybody. I mean, my grandpa Bill, I can remember the Coach Hudson, the old coach. He was retired then. He was my dad's coach and your dad's coach, football coach, and the track coach, I think. And then he lived right across the street, right? And he would have the tomato garden right in front under his windowsill there in front of his little house. His tomatoes were there. And we were over there one like early summer, and Grandpa Bill was with your grandma Curly and my grandma Marie were sitting in the lawn chairs in the front yard, and Grandpa was just laughing. He said, watch this. And we're like, what? Just watch Coach. And Coach goes over there and he looks into his tomato garden and he sees this giant, massive tomato hanging from the stalk. Now, I don't know how Grandpa Bill put it on there with Scotch tape or a staple or string or whatever it was, but Coach Merle thought that he had the prize-winning State Fair tomato so early that summer. Came over and showed it to Grandpa Bill, and he's like, "Oh yeah, look at that tomato! You're a great gardener." Just those little stories, man. That like only in a small town.
I think too, John, that's a great story. But I think that when I look back and I go back, think about Crestline, this little town, little railroad town in north central Ohio, but like the word soft, that was like we played and you played hard. Like there was no other way to play. Like when you were little growing up, when I was little growing up, it didn't matter if we were playing baseball, basketball. I remember there was one Christmas where we all went up to the high school there and we played full court basketball. And I remember I was about ready to fight your brother, Jim. I was ready to hit him in the mouth because he was bumping me and knocking me all over the place through 8th and ninth grade. But being like just kind of tough-minded. It's a tough-minded little town. Then your parents are very tough-minded. My parents very tough-minded. Like just being kind of that soft term. That wasn't a part of anything that we ever knew growing up. I don't think so.
No, it was never in part of the conversation. I mean, you can look at it and analyze it any way you want and talk about it and what's good or bad or whatever. But it's a railroad town. People worked on the railroad. They worked on the railroad their whole lives. They worked worked for the city. Worked in the Department of Water or whatever it is, like Johnny Gottfried did. And everybody kind of knew everybody, knew what everybody's about, grew up with everybody, told the stories. Hey, there's a lot of athletes in that town. They were all state athletes. Your dad, my dad, all state athletes in the state of Ohio from a little town like that. And you hear about a big game against Bucyrus or against Gallion or one of the Mansfield high schools they might be playing one of those times, or an American Legion game. I think they played against Bobby Knight in an American Legion game, and I'm pretty sure the Crestline came out on top. At least that's what the story is, right? And it's like it wasn't about being soft. And like you said, we'd go back and we'd see each other and it'd be Christmas time, but there was going to be a game played.
No doubt.
And it was going to be, for all the marbles, man, it was going to be knockdown, drag out. Like we had to prove ourselves, right? We were little growing up and everything, and we had to prove ourselves to our family that, and that we were tough enough or good enough or whatever.
Well, there's great stories coming out of there. And sometimes when you mention these stories, for me, it's like, Those games against Shelby or Bucyrus, they're like bigger than the national championship, by the way, to them. They remember every detail, and it's amazing. But, John, tell me this one, because I've used this story a lot, just talking to other young coaches, and people ask me a lot of times when I was coaching, about climbing the ladder and coaching and how do you get to the, to be where, like, I was in the ACC or the SEC and you're in NFL. But I use you an example a lot because I want you to kind of, bring it back to me a little bit. But prior to becoming the head coach of the Ravens, and you were at Philadelphia, I think special teams coach, but you had some other opportunities in there that you didn't get. I think some of those were in college maybe. And then all of a sudden, boom, your opportunity comes with Baltimore. But kind of walk me back through that a little bit maybe, and rather than kind of giving up and getting frustrated, you just stayed the course. But you did have opportunities that did not come your way that maybe you thought might have. They may come my way and they didn't. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it's everybody's got their path, and sometimes we you hear this stuff, Mark, about 5-year plans and networking and all that. And I talk to young coaches all the time. Young coaches get frustrated. Why am I not here? This person got an offensive coordinator job. Oh, this person's already a head coach and they're 31 years old. And, why is it not happening for me? And you just kind of looking back, you got some perspective on the whole thing, and you just got to know that, God's got a plan, and there's a plan that's unique for every single person. And for me, it was a strange plan for sure. You can just start going back to Crestline. I mean, you know how it is. I mean, my brother, who I love and support and would, I'd die for my brother, and he was always the guy, kind of the star athlete, third in the Heisman Trophy, Michigan, first-round pick, college All-American, Pro Bowl player, quarterback, all that stuff. And man, I've always been so proud of him, always rooting for him. But with that comes a little bit of expectation, so early on, man, I wanted to keep up. I wanted to, I was trying to be successful too, and I was doing it in coaching. kind of like you start out and you start at the bottom, right? And you work your way up through the ranks. And I never really could get a foothold, with a top job. Like even in college, I never got a chance to coach at Ohio State or Michigan or Alabama or anywhere like that as an assistant coach. I was at Cincinnati and Indiana and Morehead State. I got, Mike Gottfried. I'm forever grateful. Your uncle gave me a chance to be a graduate assistant. No low pay graduate assistant at Pitt, and to learn from Mike and from the great Sid Gilman and all the great coaches in that staff. That was probably the one break that I really got. And then he told me, Mike said, you got to be an offensive skill coach. And then that's going to be your path someday. You'll have a chance to be a head coach someday. So like any good mentee, I didn't pay any attention to him. I didn't listen to him. I got Bill Baldridge, who Baldy at Morehead, said, why don't you come be a secondary coach, special teams coach, and run the weight room at Morehead State. So I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And did that. Went to Cincinnati as a tight end coach and a recruiting coordinator. Was there for 8 years, and kind of jack of all trades, master of none. Offense, defense, tight ends, outside backers, running backs, Indiana, secondary. Cam Cameron, gracious enough to hire me. And then and special teams. Then got a call from Philadelphia when I was like 34, 35 years old. Would you interview for the special teams job? I said, happy to do it. And they said, there's about 20, 25 coaches interviewing, so don't get your hopes up, but we want to talk to you, So interviewed like 3 times, and somebody turned the job down, Mark. One of the great coaches, Rich Bisaccia, who was at Clemson at the time, right, was the Raiders coach, head coach for a bit. Now he's a Green Bay special teams coach. He got the job, but then he decided he didn't want the job. So I was the second choice there, and they called me up and said, this other guy, Rich, turned it down. Would you want it? I'm like, yeah. My wife and I were already in the car driving that way. We wanted it so bad. And then got a chance to go there, and we were there for a long time, and had, we're fortunate enough to really do really well on special teams. But again, like nobody's hiring a special teams coach. And I was always just like, you're not a coordinator, you're not an offensive coordinator, you're not a defensive coordinator. I would sit in on all the defensive meetings. I would learn what I could from Andy and from all the coaches, but didn't get a chance necessarily to become a coordinator. Then, like you said, we were doing well, so some colleges, interviewed me, gave me a chance. Colleges like Boston College and UCLA, and then also some MAC colleges. And one MAC college wouldn't even hire me. I won't even tell you what school it is. It was Northern Illinois, by the way. But they wouldn't even interview me for the head coaching job. It's like, oh man, this is going to be rough. But the story is finally that, and I was always wanted to be a head coach and was preparing for it, but UCLA gave me a chance, and they interviewed me, and I became a finalist for that job and went out there. This was in 2008, the winter of 2008, and interviewed out there in person, and the AD called me in and said, we're going to fly Ingrid out tonight. We're going to do the press conference tomorrow morning. You'll be the next head coach at UCLA. And this is about 3:00 in the afternoon after a day and a half of the final interviews and stuff. So I'm just like, wow, this is incredible. So he said, well, just wait here for a little bit, and we'll get you on the phone with the president because he's on some speaking engagement somewhere, and we'll finalize all this. So I'm like, I'm excited. So 15 minutes goes by, an hour goes by, 2 hours go by. Next thing you know, 2.5, 3 hours later, a door opens up, and here comes the AD. And I knew it wasn't going to be good news at that point. I'm like, okay, what happened? And he said, well, the president wants to talk to you before you make the hire. And he's flying in from Sacramento or somewhere, and you're going to sit down with him. And so I'm like, okay. And so I go sit down with him when he finally gets there, like sometime at night. And I could tell, like within the first 5 minutes, Mark, it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to be for him, and it wasn't going to work. And they ended up making probably the right hire. They hired Rick Neuheisel, who was, it made sense. He's a UCLA grad. He was a former head coach. He had been offensive coordinator in the NFL. He's a perfect fit. I mean, they said he said, why would I hire you when I can hire Rick Neuheisel? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know why you would, to be honest with you. But listen, it's been great, and I think we're going to plane to catch going back home. And I remember talking to Ingrid, and we were praying about what would happen, and basically just praying, God, whatever's supposed to happen, just let it happen.
Mm-hmm.
If this is not the place for us, then that's good. We don't want to go there, and he kind of really just kind of came to grips with the fact that we might be at Philly. Hopefully we could be at Philly and be a special teams coach for the rest of our life. That would be just fine. That'd be great. What an opportunity. And then Mark, like, we're getting ready to go to my brother's wedding out in Palo Alto, and we fly out there. We're doing a layover in LA, and I pick up the phone and I look at it, and it says Ozzie Newsome, Ravens, is calling, and Ozzie says, "Would you be interested in interviewing for the Ravens job?" And I just like, oh my God, this is, nobody can do something like that besides God.
Yeah.
And what ended up being the key to getting the job, it turned out, was all the things that were the problem. Not being an offensive or defensive coordinator, but being a well-rounded coach that could kind of oversee every aspect of the program. That's kind of what they were looking for. A relationship type of a coach, I think. And so all the things that I thought weren't supposed to be, or were the drawback, turned out to be the plus. And God had that planned all along. And I could have never dreamed of such a thing happening. And then now, 17 years later, it's not something you could ever really plan.
It's amazing. John, I don't think I've ever shared this story, but I was at a basketball coaches versus cancer golf event right after you got hired. I think I was at Alabama or NC State. I think I was at Alabama. But anyway, Gary Williams, the head coach at Maryland, was there, and he had your owner with him. And so I walked up and introduced myself and told him my relationship with you. And we sat there for probably a half an hour, because we were there a couple of days and played golf. But his story, John, was, he told me this point blank, is that when he interviewed you, when Steve sat down with you, and I don't remember where or when, or I don't know all the details, but he said when I sat down with John, he said after about 15 minutes, I knew in my gut, didn't matter who I interviewed, I was hiring John. How about that? He told me that. And he had a gut feeling about you and believed in you, and you guys had maybe just had some sort of a connection there, but he was all in. And I think that's kind of, obviously you've done an amazing job, and at the NFL you got to win. We all have to win, or you'll be hosting a podcast one day. But at the same time, not only have you won though, but you've had great ownership, leadership. I know Ozzie really well from Alabama. What an amazing person that guy is. One of the best people I've ever been around. But you've had that around you as well that's been really helpful for you, I think, and maybe to last as long as you have.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's the thing, I think, and the thing sometimes is that if you try to force the issue too much, try to be something you're not, go down some path you're not, overthink this place or that place, this job or that job, this salary or that salary. You start thinking about that too much when you're young, you lose sight of the fact that it's a long game you're playing, and you want to kind of get yourself in a circumstance, find yourself in a circumstance that's really meant for you. So you can kind of believe, you can take that path or not, Mark. You can believe that or not, and everybody makes those choices for themselves. I'm more of a believer that things kind of work for the good the way they're supposed to if you trust that and have faith in that. But point is like, for whatever reason, this place, maybe Steve felt it, after 15 minutes, like you said. But when we went, the second interview, when I came back here for the job, and we did a second round of a whole day, and if he knew after 15 minutes, he decided he was going to put me through it for 2 days. I know that. I'm going to talk to him about that. Could have been a lot easier, but about 5 o'clock that afternoon, it was a Friday, and they bring me into the big conference room down there. And I'm a young guy, man. I'm a special teams coach. I'd been a secondary coach for 1 year in Philly, and I was a total long shot, total dark horse to get the job. And Steve's sitting there, and they kind of pepper me with some questions. And the one answer that I think kind of sealed it was, they said, "How are you going to make this work?" And I kind of looked around the room and recognized what you said and what you just acknowledged. I said, well, it's going to be up to all of us. Mm-hmm. How it's going to work, it's going to be all of us working together. I'm going to do my part as best I can, and I'm going to count on you all to do your part as best you can, and we're going to have to work together as a team, because I'm going into this, maybe there's some strengths, and there's going to be plenty of weaknesses, and you're going to have to be there for me, and that's what I'm going to be counting on. And Steve, right then, he got up out of his chair, walked over and shook my hand and said, "Congratulations, you're the next head coach of the Baltimore Ravens."
Wow. How about that? How about that? Well, I think that's a testament to,
Interesting, isn't it?
It is interesting, John, but it's a testament to where I think your character and who you are, it kind of comes out. And it happens all the time. And people comment to me about it, and people that have never met you, don't know you, and they just kind of see you on television. Or they have a glimpse. They believe in your character. They like, and I think obviously he saw that in you too, that you have that, and you have, the roots, like the small town roots, and your dad and all of us, and all those kind of things play into it. But you've been able to do that. So let me ask you this one, John, and I know you've been asked this question 500 times, and probably more than 500. But you start off, and you're playing college football, you get into coaching, then you get your break and get into the NFL, and you're rolling along. Then you become a head coach in the NFL. And now you reach a Super Bowl. You reach a Super Bowl, and different than anybody else ever, probably in any major sport. I don't know that it's ever happened. I doubt it's ever happened, but you got to look across the sideline, and it's your brother. It's your brother. Now, let me say this before I ask this question. I love Jim too, but Jim's a tough one sometimes too now. He can be a little ornery, and he can be a little feisty. So I got John and we got Jim, and you got mom and dad over here in the crowd. But all of a sudden, you're looking at that thing different than anybody else ever has. Not that the guy over there needs to be your enemy. That it's not that, but it is your brother. That's your brother.
Right.
And it's your brother who's also had a ton of success his whole life. He's played, like you mentioned, played in the NFL. He was all this, starting quarterback at Michigan and blah, blah, blah. He's all that resume, which you didn't really have that type of resume. So now you're going up against him. What's your first thought?
I guess my first thought is, well, here we go again. Here we go again. You get a whole lifetime of these type of moments, and the Super Bowl is kind of a big deal. It's kind of an important little thing career-wise, but I don't know if it's any bigger deal than beating your brother in some competition. I mean, anybody's got a brother understands that. It's just we've been in so many fights. We've been in so many battles. I mean, basketball, golf, wrestling, knockout and pitching. We throw the football at each other from a distance, and then you take, you throw it hard as you can, catch it, throw it hard as you can, take a step closer until somebody doesn't catch it or gets a tooth knocked out, And he always had a better arm than me, so I had to have better hands, just to even compete. But that's kind of like, it's all in there. Like you walk out there in the field before the game, and you kind of recognize the whole moment, and then you look across on the sideline, even during the game. Once the game gets started, you kind of get into the game. You're really not thinking about it. Then all of a sudden you take a peek over there, and it's like, oh, there he is. There he is. I mean, sometimes he's over there getting mad at the officials, and all that. So was I, but, it's crazy. I'm Bill Belichick. I tell this story sometimes. It's the greatest story. But we're playing New England, and we're out there in pregame warm-ups while our teams are working out. And Coach Belichick, who I have the utmost respect for and admire, I'm standing at the 50-yard line next to him. The year after they beat us to go to the Super Bowl, the year before in the championship game, I'm standing next to him, and we're watching the game on the scoreboard, the Niners versus the Falcons. And the Niners are up by 5, and the Falcons are taking the ball down the field. And you see the Falcons go all the way down the field. Now, like, the stands are full. They're watching it. Our players are warming up, but they're watching it like out of the corner of their eye. And Bill and I are standing there kind of with our arms folded, chit-chatting a little bit, sort of, nervous, watching it. And so the Falcons get the ball down to the 5-yard line, get it to fourth down. And I think Navarro Bowman runs through into the backfield and makes a hit in the backfield, and the 49ers win the game. And Bill Belichick looks over right up at me, right dead in my eyes, looks at me right in my eyes, looks at me, Mark, and says, looks like your brother's going to the Super Bowl. Wow. I mean, you talk about the heart of the matter right there, because I guarantee you, my wife was telling me beforehand, if he wins, you better win. He can't get to the Super Bowl before you do. You know how that goes. So that's how the whole thing started, and then beforehand, I mean, Jim made some great comments about, his brothers will be on the sideline with him during the game, and that's exactly right. That's how it is. You play the game, you're on the sideline, and then the game gets played, and after the game, normally, I mean, you're ecstatic, right? You celebrate, Gatorade dump, carried off the field, confetti on the shoulders of your guys, man. I was always dreaming about what that would be like.
Mm-hmm.
we won the game. We got to stop on the kickoff return. I look around, man, there's nobody within 10 yards of me. Nobody wants to come near me. And I know why. I got to go shake my brother's hand, my brother's hand. And that's not an easy thing to do, So I shake his hand, and he kind of gives me a little elbow, we're not hugging. And I gave him a hug anyway. And because I told him I loved him.
He said, we're not hugging.
Yeah, we just, it'll never happen again, Mark. I mean, if it does, it'll be us two again, because he's back now. So it's crazy.
It probably reminded you, like you're wrestling in the bedroom when you're like 8 years old. Somebody's pinning somebody down, and you guys are getting after each other. You've been doing it your whole life. And if you had that moment when the rare times that I could beat him in something. I mean, I was older for a while, so I was bigger at times. So I did get my fair share of licks in, which I think he probably remembers, But when you do come away victorious over your brother, there's nothing like it. No.
In a wrestling match or a one-on-one basketball game. The Super Bowl, that's really not something you're thinking about happening. So, even the family, the families were great, and they pulled for both of us, but you could tell. Mm-hmm. There were some people that were on Jim's side. There were some other cousins and stuff that were on my side. You kind of could scope it out, who was on whose side. And you really don't forget. I kind of remember
funny.
Who was on Jim's side,
That's
so
funny.
I haven't really forgotten that.
That's funny. John, real quick before I'm going to let you go, but talk a little bit about, again, this will maybe go back to your parents, Crestline. Your parents, have always been great to me. They were my godparents when I was little. If something that would have ever happened to my parents, they had committed to take me in and all that. But it's very evident, like your faith is very important to you. Winning is important to all of us. We get it. We grew up around it. Like, people don't realize when you're the son of a coach like you were, and your father was a head football coach, you understand what winning and losing is more than everybody. You understand how hard it hurts when you lose. Most people don't get it. They think you just go on to the next game, and when you lose, it's the pain and how it just stays with you, or the winning, the jubilation. But outside of that, you have kind of just held strong to like your faith, and like talk a little bit real quick about maybe where that came from and how you've maintained it, because I know it's hard, especially in your world, in that league. It's a hard thing to do. It's not an easy thing.
Yeah, no question about it. Like, and how does that happen for anybody? Everybody's kind of got their own way of doing it, but I know that's a place that you've always been, Mark, and I've always admired that all the way back when you were in college, even playing. That was a big thing for you, athletes in action, all the things that you did, and Mike and Joe and Johnny, and we all grew up in that Catholic tradition there, St. Joe's, over there at in Crestline, Ohio. I just heard today the 8th generation, Adam Schrack's son is going to be baptized there. The 8th generation of our family be baptized in that church. So it's incredible tradition. Yeah, how about that this Saturday? So really a cool deal. But I just think it kind of for me is blended from what you talked about. First of all, it's family. Like when you're blessed enough, you're privileged enough, if you want to use that word, to have the greatest privilege that you can really have is to have great parents and to have great supporting family around you, cousins and aunts and uncles that care about you, look after you, godparents, like you said, that if something doesn't go right, I'll be okay. I got people that love me and care about me. That's the first entryway to me to faith, to trusting. And that's like when you're a parent, or you're a godparent, or you're an uncle, or there's someone in the community, some young person in the community that doesn't have that, and you have an opportunity to take them under your wing. Coaches so many times are that person. They're so often the person that takes that young person under their wing. I think guys in here doing the draft right now that say, this couple took me in and raised me, or they took me in high school when my parents couldn't take care of me, and they took care of me, and it changed my life. Someone to look at you and tell you that you have value and that you have worth and that you're special and that you can do it. To me, that's kind of the entryway to faith, and then the difference you can make in somebody's life. That's our responsibility. God does the rest, right? Then God takes over. And like all the things we go through, like you said, the winning, the losing. Mark, you've lost games that you walk off the court and you feel like you've been cut in half with machine gun fire. Mm-hmm. I know you do. Mm-hmm. Right in that moment when the shot doesn't drop, or the pass isn't completed, or the touchdown. I've had a 4th and 12 go for a touchdown to knock us out of the playoffs before. Our guys have had to walk off the field with that devastating moment. But those are all the things, including the victories too, like you said. Or when your dad would bring the players home and you'd have dinner on Thursday night, a spaghetti meatball dinner with their girlfriends, and you get to see the interaction. You get to see that these guys are your idols and your heroes, and you watch them, and they're your dad's guys, and they're shooting around with you and playing ball with you or wrestling around with you and stuff like that. And I think that's all the stuff that plants the seed. And then, to me, God takes over the rest of the way. And sometimes he does it with, an arm around you. Sometimes he does it, with a tough break, that you just got to learn how to deal with and understand that just makes you stronger.
Yeah. Well, John, man, I'm telling you, I'm extremely proud of you. I pull for you, and you got a lot of them pulling for you. But I appreciate the, our families and what they did for all of us. Your parents, my parents, that little bitty town, that little community, Uncle Jerry, all of them, Uncle Johnny. I mean, nobody knows who we're talking about but us.
Yeah, Uncle Jim who walks around saying, my name's Jim Harbaugh. I'll bet you $5 my name is Jim Harbaugh. I'm Jim Harbaugh. And he wins a lot of bets.
So we were very blessed. But anyway, man, thank you for your time, and we'll be rooting for you all the way. Thank you, John.
I appreciate it, Mark. Let me just say, it's an honor to be on your show, man. You do a great job. You change people's lives. What you're doing right now, it makes a difference because young coaches, they listen, they pay attention, they hear what you're saying. And it's like, I think Billy Graham said, and your dad, or your dad and your uncle showed me this quote. He said, a coach will influence more people in a year than the average person will in a lifetime. Mm. And I believe that's true. And you've done that your whole life. So thanks for what you've done. And for our families too.
All right, John. Thank you.